Well, as a new week begins, let's talk about 10 stories today. 10 stories that typically don't hit the headlines as much, but it's something you need to know as someone who wants to live sustainable, as a homesteader, as a prepper, or someone who just wants to be in the know. If we gain knowledge and seek wisdom in any of these stories, it helps us gain a better understanding of what we need to do to take care of our families. Let's jump into it today. We're going to hit the headlines of these, and we want you to dive deeper to see what's best for you and your family. Let's jump into it. This video starts right now.
You and I, the future is bright.
Hey guys, welcome to the Max. Thank you so much for being here today. If you're new to the channel, go down here, press subscribe, ring the bell, give us a thumbs up. It does help us stay in the algorithm. If you don't like the content, that's okay. Tell us a good constructive comment to help us as a community to do better. So let's jump into the stories for today and how they can impact you. Number one story is Biden administration violated the First Amendment when it came to the content of freedom that has been pushed on social media. Now, we talk about this a lot, and again, as a content creator on YouTube, this kind of hits me hard. What we're seeing now is a fight for our First Amendment rights. We've always seen battles for the 2A rights and all that. Well, now we're starting to see the battle for the First Amendment rights, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, all the true freedoms that have been set up by our founding fathers. So when we hear that we are being subsided, or maybe we're being censored in some way on social media, or not getting the stories that we need to get, I think that should be eye-opening. Now, the good thing is you're starting to see platforms like Rumble. You're starting to see platforms like Twitter or X. You're starting to see platforms that have a little bit more openness to them. The point of those platforms, though, is you can seek some information that you can't get anywhere else. And when we see the administration pushing and cracking down on those things, it should scare you a little bit. 2A rights is a big thing, but when we don't have 2A rights, we're not going to have 1A rights. We're not going to have the First Amendment. Number two, we've seen the big push for IRS growth and making sure that they're taking care of all the loopholes when it comes to people who are committing tax fraud. Well, no one should commit tax fraud. However, I do believe the tax system is broken. We've talked about that, and we're going to be doing a video on that very, very soon. But we have problems with our taxes. However, if we don't abolish our IRS, and if we don't see the IRS get smaller, these extra agents they're putting on, all this enforcement they're putting on, it's not coming for the uber rich or the oligarchs. They're coming for the common middle class or the upper middle class. There's a new story that shows that IRS is going to be using AI tools to be able to find all the people who may be trying to get out of paying tax. Well, what that means is they're going to go after more and more people. And the kicker always comes down to the government is not taking in enough money. The government is spending too much money. So when they spend too much money, they got to find other people to get the money from. More taxes are coming, or more loopholes are closing up. Be very, very conscientious of AI-generated tools that are going to be used against us. So this part is not only the fact that watch the IRS and watch maybe the enforcement of more taxes, but also the fact that they're going to be using the tools that I told you are going to be dangerous, AI. Number three is a big one. We talk about this a lot. But there's a story that shows from Zero Hedge. It says central bank gold buying continued hot in July. So we're getting the numbers to show that central banks are buying gold too. Now, you heard a story just last week about China. I think they had like 5 tons in stockpile of gold. More and more and more countries, even our central banks, are picking up gold. When people say gold is unattainable, it's cost too much, I understand that it is expensive. I understand that everybody can't just buy an ounce of gold every month. I'm not saying do that, but I am saying you better start making your mind up to find out ways that you can purchase gold, even silver. Remember, gold is not meant for you to go buy bread at the store. Gold is meant to hold wealth and value. So it's an asset. So instead of sending your money in crypto, or instead of sending your money in the stock market that may be losing some, why don't you check out gold options? Your central banks are doing it. The people who print money are buying gold. It's at the highest of all times where they're buying gold. China, that needs commodities, that needs back gold. They need gold to back some of their BRICS currencies and all those things that they're trying to. When other countries are buying gold, you should be doing the same. Our central banks are doing it, so that means there is a plan. I believe in stockpiling cash. I believe in utilizing cash, but I believe in holding a good bit of gold as an asset. Now, we use Genesis Gold. You don't have to use Genesis Gold. There's a link below. but you need to be looking at options to get gold. These stories show that more and more countries, more and more oligarchs, more and more big players are buying gold. Number 4 is a big concern to me because we believe in teaching our children at home and making sure that we're giving them the best education possible based on what we believe in our core values and morals with Christianity, and also we lean towards good education for them. It's not about just indoctrination. Well, we're seeing more and more pushes, like this story shows. Our duty as parents is to affirm our children. That came from a representative of California. Now, that sounds good. We need to make sure we're taking care of our children and supporting them in different ways. Now, this is not what I'm talking about, though. This is dealing with the big affirmation push of changing the way they think about indoctrination and things that are being taught to them. If you're not affirming what the schools are teaching them, and it could be indoctrination, then you are going to be punished. If you're in these liberal states, you have to be careful, because you as a parent, your rights are getting taken away based on the stories that are coming out. These are not just representatives being crazy and saying what they want to say. They're saying as a body of representation for the people of the people, they're going to take your rights as a parent if you don't affirm everything that is being taught to them. And some of those things are not biblically sound, of course. Some of those things goes against your morals and values. Are you ready to co-parent with the government? That's a big concern. It may not concern me in Mississippi, but it may concern you in California. It may concern you in New York. It may concern you in Washington or Oregon. Move out of those states if you can. If not, you better be watching what your children are being taught and what school system you're in. Number 5, we hear about the Georgia indictments. Here's what's scary. You may not like Trump, that's okay. You may not like the lawyers, that's okay. But they're starting to want to indict other senators for speaking. They're wanting to indict more leadership. They're wanting to indict just a wide array of people. When you start going after people, this is a city. This is a state, a big city in a state. This is a big city in a state. Understand that. But we're talking about one person targeting not only the opposition candidate, 2 opposition senators of that state, and other senators that just said, let's check on this election. Let's check on what's going down. The lawyers, the spokesman for one side. When you go after opposition of one party, that is tyranny. That's not freedom. If you remember, go back in history, there's been plenty of times on both sides, Democrats and Republicans, where they challenged the narrative. If I'm not mistaken, I think it's in Kennedy's time when Hawaii kind of did the same thing, where they went back and went to the state of Hawaii. You can fact check me on that. Go check it. But if I'm not mistaken, I think it was a time where they found some discrepancies there. It has happened in times before. Think of Bush Gore. Think of Trump Clinton. There's been times where the other side was, a little sour. It happens. Winners and losers. But to then say, I'm going to go after them. I don't remember Bush going after Gore. I don't remember Trump going after Clinton to a point where they were trying to arrest them. We're at a very scary time in our political atmosphere because we're starting to go after opposition. The only people that go after opposition are tyrannical countries that do not have freedom. Keep an eye on this. Number 6, we are struggling to find jobs. We are struggling to make ends meet. People are living paycheck to paycheck. Remember, I told you 60 to 70% of people are living paycheck to paycheck. Almost of the lower income, 80% of people are living on credit cards. However, Biden's administration came out just this last week, and they're going to try to make a nationwide push and spend millions of dollars to build a workforce training for illegal immigrants. There's more and more illegal immigrants coming in our countries. They're causing issues. I think in New York, they just spent $25 or $35 million to house a lot of them. I want people to be taken care of. I don't want people on the streets. But we have to get to a point where we have to close borders and make sure that we're taking care of our nation and our people first. This is very concerning because if we're spending millions on people who are illegally here, it's unlawful. So they're breaking the law, and we're willing to subsidize them breaking the law. Well, we just talked about in Georgia, people speaking. We talked about in the first point where the Biden administration are going after the freedom of speech. We have little issues if they know you broke the law. However, we're allowing people to come here unlawfully, and then we're subsidizing it. Very bad policy. If we don't get a hold on the immigration issues across the state, across the country, I think we're going to see major ramifications and really cause our workforce, the American people, to struggle. Number 7, mortgage rates are still going to be 7 to 8% for the ongoing future. They're actually saying it could go up again depending on what the Fed does, if they're going to end up going up, raising the rates again. This is concerning because most people may not can buy a home. Now, I'm going to be the bad guy here, and I hate to tell you this. I think we need to keep higher rates, 5 to 6%, 7%. I think that's not a bad thing because it teaches people not to live off debt. When we have 0%, 1%, 2% interest rates, what happens? People can't make money by putting their money in the bank, by being good stewards with holding and saving money, and also people feel like they could just borrow because it's so cheap. We have to get out of the mentality of quit borrowing money. However, when it comes to home, lands, good assets, I want you to buy a house. I want you to have something like that that you can pass to your children one day or have it as an asset to retire with. The problem is if their interest rate's 7, 8, 9% or more, it's harder to buy a home. Not only that, inflated prices of homes are still up because people built way too big of homes because they had free money. So they thought they could always afford it. Well then, interest rate goes up, now they're upside down their home and they're having to sell it for a higher price. So the housing market is going to hit a major problem coming up soon. If you can buy a home, buy a home. But be careful, 7, 8, 9% interest is pretty high. Hopefully it will go down a little bit, but if you can find a good deal on a home, still buy it, but be looking for a refi. Maybe goes lower in interest rates. But this at 7, 8, 9% is making more people rent. Rent's going to go up. You're always going to be slave to the lender if you're always borrowing money to pay for things, and you can never have a true asset. Real estate's a good thing, but right now it's high, so be very conscientious of that. Mortgage rates, I don't think are going down anytime soon either. Number 8, you hear these areas, these counties, these states, like my state said they're not going to put any more mandates in. Well, that's great. And I made a video the other day about lockdowns and masks and things like that. You can go back and look at those videos. Here's the question though. If that's not going to take place and all the naysayers on these videos say, oh, that's a farce. If it's such a farce, why when the Republicans like J.D. Vance, he tries to push a bill to say, look, we're not going to instill any mandates. The Democrats still pushed it down. So you may hear the Democratic leaders of states and representatives say, we're not going to enforce anything like this. We don't think it'll get that bad. However, they're voting against never mandating. So they want to leave that option open. Be careful of that. Don't look at what people are saying as much as the actions that they are portraying. If they're saying they're not going to lock the state down, if they're saying they're not going to pass these ordinances or these protocols, then why are they voting against it? Politicians are good at this. They're good at getting on TV and having talking points and voting completely different. That is on both sides, Republicans and Democrats. Be wary of what's being voted on. This is a big story, not because there may not be mandates in your state. But what I am saying is when you think of states across the nation, there's still states that may be putting in protocols. And the Democrats nationwide just voted against not allowing that to happen again. That's a big story. Number 9, this is a big deal. Texas is having a state of emergency when it comes to their infrastructure, which is the grid. Texas always has problems with their grid, but this should show for all our states. The more we want to go to electricity and take away from petroleum, that is so stupid. We can't do that. That is absolutely stupid because our grids are already struggling, statewide, nationwide, and they're not actually protected as good as they should be from a defense mechanism from maybe attacks and things like that, weather, things like that. So the more we want to put on the grid, the more dangerous this is for you. So have some alternative energy. If you live in Texas, you know the problems you're having. It's probably dealing with weather and heat. I think every state is going to deal with this. California dealt with this. If you start seeing brownouts, blackouts, go back to the videos we talked about living off grid and doing some things to prepare alternatively for safety of your family. This is a big deal, and I think this is just a prerequisite of more, bad weather that comes because we go through different times of periods where weather gets worse. It's going to happen. Droughts are going to come. Big hurricanes are going to come. Then we're going to have pretty weather sometimes. But the problem is if we devote everything to the grids, we're going to see more problems because we're going to realize, oh, we were too dependent on the grid. Don't be so dependent on the grid. Understand that there's problems with our grids. And when you hear administration say they're in an infrastructure bill, most of it's lies because most of it's not being spent on infrastructure. This is one of the infrastructure bills that needs to happen My tax dollars should be going to fix our grids, not to fix someone else's grids across the world. Number 10, we talked about this the other day with unions and striking. Now, it's amazing how I got a lot of kickback and people saying, oh, that'll never happen. They're underpaid. And I said it's going to be a domino effect. All of a sudden, Portland teachers prepare to strike. Again, the United Auto Workers are preparing to strike. There's a new strike coming for the transit people next year. They're already saying. Who does that affect? It affects the consumer. It affects your children. All of a sudden, if teachers strike and these big teachers union strike, first of all, are they even teaching your kids anything? That's the first question you need to ask. Secondly, what are you going to do if all of a sudden teachers strike and they close down school? Are you going to be able to make sure your kid is okay, but at the same time you've got to work to provide for them? There's a lot of questions there. It's amazing that we pay into a system that we have to pay taxes to go to the school systems, personal tax, property tax, and we're having more problems still with the school system. The Educational Department, the IRS, these are two organizations that need to be completely redone or revolutionized or just taken away. I think you're going to see more strikes, not only in the private sector, but in the public sector. And what scares me about that is who is it benefiting and who is it hurting? It's not benefiting you as the consumer, and it's actually hurting you and hurt your bottom line. Lastly, did you see the story that Biden is shutting down more exploration, shutting down the validity of a lot of the Alaskan petroleum drilling rights? So we're in a diesel shortage. They're cutting fuel for OPEC, and you're more volatile. Your grids are falling to pieces, and all of a sudden the Biden administration is taking away the validity of drilling rights that the Trump administration allowed to happen in Alaska. That could be a big concern. That's jobs loss. That's energy dependence coming and creeping up more and having to rely on foreign oil of people who don't like us. Be careful of that. Your fuel prices will go up. We've already talked about it. You've already seen it. Go back to that video of me talking about that, and people are already putting their amounts where they've went up 20 or 30 or 40 cents per gallon. And if you're driving a lot, that's going to impact you pretty good and impact your bottom line. So this was a little bit different video. I didn't go in depth on these subjects, but I wanted to give you just these one-line hits on the stories that you need to pay attention for the week. I want to do the best I can for my family. I want to make the wisest decisions as someone who wants to be sustainable, who wants to live a life that is, of course, pleasing to, again, as Christians, to our God. And I want to make sure I take care of my family with security, financially, mentally, and all the stress that comes along in the world. If I'm prepared for it more by knowing these kind of stories that maybe not hits the surface, things that the media doesn't cover, if I know what's going on around me and in the world, then I can prepare. I can buy the gold that I need to buy. I can buy the alternative energy that I need. I can learn how to do things from off-grid. I can learn to have extra blankets during the wintertime. Think through what you're doing. If it costs you more with health insurance, gas, and all of a sudden IRS, you better be ready. So prepare like you're supposed to. Take care of your family. Gain wisdom from the stories. Dig in a little deeper on these stories. Find out what you can learn and maybe see some of the tyrannical things that's going on in America and how we need to gain back our freedoms and understand we've been blessed in America. It's time to have a pride back in America and understand we can do better. Guys, thank you so much for watching. God bless.